even be feasible to do it. We had received from a source a report that says that a local restaurant owner had been driving for more than 15 years without a valid license because she'd never followed up on a diversion agreement from a drunk driving conviction more than a decade earlier. We looked at this and said, well, is this a story? And first of all, the first thing we wanted to do is make sure that this document was correct, that it was a valid document. We asked our source, and our source was a little fishy about where she got the document from. And we had a little trouble following through it, which made us suspicious as well. So we actually called the Department of Motor Vehicles and asked them how you get this document. And they told us, and we did. That's kind of interesting because later we're accused of stealing it, but we actually did exactly what the Department of Motor Vehicles said. We looked at it. We found out from another source that the restaurant owner was just having a dispute with her estranged husband over custody of cars in a divorce settlement, and that he was contending that he should get all their cars because he was the only one who had a valid driver's license. And we said, there's no way we want to run this story. But there was an allegation local police were fully aware of it and not doing anything about it. So we forwarded this along to the police chief and the sheriff. Simultaneous to this, but without our knowledge, the same source had given this same document to a city council member. And the restaurant owner was going up for a liquor license, and the city council member asked the police chief, asked the city administrator to have the police chief look into whether this would disqualify her from a liquor license. That's the whole setup. What happened after that is where things get interesting. The police chief didn't really care much about the thing. In fact, the city administrator said they weren't even going to look into it when the mayor sent it out. But all of a sudden, that Monday morning, when the police chief came in and read his email that said that we had it as well, he decided that there was an opportunity. That opportunity presented itself first with an ally of the mayor on the city council talking to the restaurant owner about how the vice mayor and the newspaper were trying to get her. Now, we don't even know how he knew about this, because the only persons who supposedly knew that we had it and the vice mayor had it was the police chief. We've been trying to get the emails and other things that were exchanged, but we have been rebuffed so far. There's going to be a state lawsuit about that coming up in the near future. But he talked to the restaurant owner, got her all whipped up. The police chief called her and said, you've been the victim of a crime. She didn't report a crime. The police chief said it was. The mayor talked to her and said, well, the only way I can get rid of this vice mayor, he tried to get her recalled and other things as if she's convicted of a crime. So lo and behold, the city police chief all of a sudden starts preparing a criminal investigation targeting us and the vice mayor, two of his quote unquote political enemies, the mayor's political enemies. The police chief also had a leg in this because he'd just recently been appointed, and we had received information from former coworkers of his that he was appointed after being demoted by the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Here he was in Kansas City, Missouri, as a police captain, supervising dozens of people, getting $115,000 a year, and he left a year before his retirement would be vested to move to Marion, Kansas, tiny little town, supervising two other officers for $60,000 a year. Doesn't make sense until you find out that he was under allegations of sexual misconduct and was about to be demoted all the way down to sergeant in the Kansas City Police Department. But we had that information, and he accused us it's all a lie, and he would sue us if we ran it. And we couldn't get any cops to go on the record, nor could we get documents of it, because it's notoriously difficult to find documents about police misconduct. Police officers themselves won't go on the record with other people in the department, the thin blue line, and the personnel records are confidential personnel records, so they wouldn't give them to us. So we didn't run that story. This a couple of months before, but he knew we had it, so he didn't like us. He found, by the way, our documents when he that Friday raided our newsroom. He came to our newsroom with 5 officers, threw all of our people out, came through the back door, read our reporters their rights, searched their computers, and seized most of our computers, seized the computers of all the reporters, my computer, seized our file server, seized our backup hard drives. We were left without anything. We didn't even have, when you put out a newspaper, you have to have your nameplate at the top of it. Well, we didn't even have that. He'd taken that away from us. It was on DVDs, but he'd taken all the computers. We had DVD drives. He also raided the home of the vice mayor at the same time, and my own personal home, which I was living with my 98-year-old mother, who I was helping care for her. 7 police officers showed up at her home. They were there. 2 of them were there for a total of 2.5 to 3 hours. The 7 of them were only there for a shorter period, but there were 7 of them jammed into her living room, seizing her computer as well. They kept all these computers till it was well past the time for us to publish the next week's issue. We had to cobble together a little network. We went into our junk room and found a bunch of old Windows XP computers that we had used in the past and set them up as a new network, and found a bunch of things out of old locations, and did put out a newspaper at that time. We also got the Kansas Bureau of Investigation involved. They took over the investigation. The county attorney says, "Oh, I didn't ever read the search warrant before I approved it." The Kansas Bureau of Investigation says, "No, we weren't involved in this." The judge, when we asked for the probable cause affidavit for the search warrant, said there wasn't such a thing existing in her office. That's required before you get one. Enough irregularities going on. And as we have found, and eventually the county attorney withdrew the search warrant. A judge ordered all the material returned. It took us at least 2 weeks to actually get it all back. They added some stuff that they stole. They stole our data out of our database. They made a copy of it, and they found a bunch of things. They weren't very good at it. They were running a program that's designed to find pornography, and they didn't know how to do searches. So one of the search terms they used was the word Kansas. Well, they got a lot of hits on the word Kansas. We're located in Kansas. But most of what they found were, they found from our ad bank the logo for the 8th Judicial District of Kansas, and they found a clip that some applicant for a job had sent in. We didn't hire him in 2018 about the haunted hotels of Arkansas. They found that like 20 or 30 times on their searches. So they didn't find anything to our knowledge. One of the computers still acts a little strange, and we've kind of isolated it from our system because of it. We've had a forensic expert analyze it. But as time has gone on, things have come out that, well, people weren't all telling the truth. The county attorney had been fully briefed on this multiple times, and in fact delayed the search a day so that he could look at the documents. Yet 2 days later, when the state came in, oh no, the documents were, the affidavits were invalid and we didn't do it. And then 2 days after that, after we'd already published, he decided to withdraw them. So he's kind of lying. KBI said they weren't involved. Well, they knew all about it too. We found out from documents we've obtained. Not only did an agent know, a supervisory agent knew. The sheriff's department, 3 sheriff's deputies have quit because of what the sheriff's role in that was. The police chief finally was suspended after 6 weeks and resigned. We are learning yet more as time goes on. We are trying right now to get messages that have been sent between the mayor and the police chief. The police chief, as this started unfolding, called the restaurateur and told her, destroy all the text messages that have been exchanged between us so people don't get the wrong idea. There was a rumor they were having an affair. We've tried to get the personal messages. He bragged that he had put everything on his personal email account so that people couldn't find it. There is a law in Kansas that says that those are subject to open records requests, but the city has denied them, saying it was too big of a burden to have to look on his private account. We currently, actually this morning, the Open Government Coalition in the state of Kansas is starting a process to file suit against the city of Marion over that. There's already been one federal lawsuit filed by one of our reporters who, because of the strife of all this, the mental anguish, resigned and couldn't come back to Marion. Another of our reporters has got a suit pending. She is someone who has a disability of seizure disorder. She suffered a seizure after the stress of this, and will forever be on a higher dose of medication for the rest of her life, and is having some memory problems. We will be filing suit. My mother, who told the people while they were searching for her house that this would be the death of her, and if she had a heart attack and died, it would be their fault, murder, and did in fact have a heart attack and died the next day. So that will be part of our lawsuit too. So I will be filing a suit. The newspaper will be filing a suit. They will be in court for the next 4 or 5 years, and they're going to lose because there's a federal law that says you can't execute a search warrant in a newsroom. You have to ask for the material through subpoena, which allows the reporters to give time so that they aren't disclosing confidential things, like the file that the one police officer found in the desk drawer of one of our reporters, who'd even been off the week that we obtained this document. That was all the investigation of the police chief, and pointed it out to the chief so he could look at it. Well, that's a violation of the search warrant as well. That guy who pointed it out is now the interim police chief here. So this is not over. There's a lot of things going on. But what this really comes down to is that they didn't like the fact that we were reporting concerns, that there were people out there that were having a minority of people who would try to raise a question. They approved a city budget, city council did, without the city council members ever even knowing what was in it. They didn't even express it. The bureaucracy was in control here. And the bureaucracy didn't like that, didn't like the fact that it was being exposed. So they tried to punish us. It was bullying, plain and simple. And most of the country has seen it. But the people in town are still afraid to talk about it. They believe, if any of you have seen the movie Pleasantville, we're in black and white here. We had been doing a good job. After retiring from teaching there at U of I had long said that the big problem with journalism was not the new technology or anything else. It was that we had lost track. We were spending too much time and effort worrying about new technology and too little time and effort worrying about the content of our reporting, to go out there and do what journalists are supposed to do, which is find out, be the voice for the people who don't have a voice. Democracy functions if everyone listens and everyone talks. We have to express our concerns, be free and willing to express them, and have someone listen to them and come to an agreement. When you create a system where everything's already decided in advance, everything is set, and anybody who speaks against it is negative, is trying to take Pleasantville out of black and white and put it into color. When you have that system, you are terribly prone to having people step into a leadership vacuum who will start doing things that are wrong, whether it involves people, police officers choking people to death on the street, or raiding newspapers' offices, or trying to exact revenge, or graft, or corruption, or whatever else. If people are silenced, and anyone who is contrary to that is ostracized, you have the situation in which very bad things can happen. The idea that government is right under any circumstance is the attitude that was present in Nazi Germany. It's the attitude that's present in Vladimir Putin's Russia, where you don't have dissent, you don't tolerate it. The role of journalism has always been to make sure that democracy works well. We're the grease that makes it work. Back years ago, the old saying that the journalists are supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That was actually uttered as an insult against a Chicago journalist. That's all they did was, you just comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. It actually is a pretty good idea. It means that we're there to make sure that everything is being heard, that truth is coming out, that people are challenging things, and that all parties have a voice in the society. We don't care what they do about it. I mean, I'm sort of a Jeffersonian. I don't care what people do with information as long as they have it. Eventually, they may make some wrong decisions if they have information, but In the long run, if they have adequate information, they will make good decisions. They will work together. They will consider each other. We'll have a functioning democracy. When we start getting to the point that we live in an echo chamber, like social media or the late night TV shows that call themselves journalists, but are in fact just screaming heads who keep talking about the same thing over and over, we get to a system where, I'll sound professorial here, it's called heuristic systematics modeling. If you believe you don't have any control over things, you don't look for facts anymore. You look for images. You go after hot button issues. You decide that, and I don't want to make this political because there's a little more on one side than another, but whether it's living wage or build that wall or we don't like trans people or whatever it happens to be, issues that are just hot button issues that dominate all of our political debate, and we only listen to the slogans about them. We don't look at any facts. One of the roles of journalism is to make people see facts. One of the challenges of journalism is to make them see facts in a way that they will listen to them. That usually involves putting a human face on things. That's why in most of the journalism classes you'll hear about, we don't want to just look at the issue here, because people won't read facts until they get the notion that the facts have some relevance to humans. Once we start making it about human beings, once they can relate to these stories as human beings, they start seeing them. And part of what made this story important was my mother's. Turn that off. Was my mother's story. We had surveillance video of them raiding her home. And if you haven't seen it, I can tell you where it is. If you look online, it is at mnks.us/JOAN. And you can see several of the videos there. The last one's probably the most interesting. And it made a lot of headlines around the world because she calls them a bunch of assholes and get out of her house and stands up to them. She has one line in there where she says, "I'm just an old woman." She says, "No, I'm not. I'm a person," and accuses them of being Nazis and a bunch of other things. She was very upset about this. She had a right to be. This was an intrusion on the First Amendment. It was an intrusion on the Fourth Amendment. It was unnecessary. It was like sending the SWAT team after a jaywalker, only to find that the jaywalker was crossing in a crosswalk. So we did nothing wrong. We've since then been very open about it. It has significantly helped that we had that human face to put on the story. It's sad that my mother died. She died the next day. She died literally talking to me. One of the things I was trying to comfort her and saying to her was, sometimes when bullies, and that's what this really was bullying, when bullies go one step too far, it's what finally stops them. They can steal their lunch money for weeks and weeks and weeks, but if they try to go one step too far, sometimes they get their comeuppance. And I think maybe out of all this, something good will happen. Her line to me was, "Yeah, but I probably won't be alive then." And she said, "I don't feel too well. I don't know whether I want to eat in this," and died the next sentence. It was sad, but if you're 98, it's going to happen sometime soon. And it probably would be comforting to you to know that your death meant something to other people, other places in the world. And it really led to the outpouring of support. I will tell you that Marion, Kansas, I bought this paper with my parents 25 years ago while I was still at the University of Illinois, basically to keep it out of the hands of chains. I only started working here when I got stuck here in Zoom in COVID hell and taught my classes from actually where I'm sitting right now. And online classes, by the way, are crap and you shouldn't deal with them. But that was one of the reasons I decided to retire, was I didn't want to do more online classes. I did that for a year and a half from here. Couldn't go back to Illinois at one point. At any rate, we bought this paper 25 years ago to keep it out of the hands of people like that. I've decided to stay here to say that journalism really matters, and that if you do journalism well, if you concentrate on doing good journalism, not following the gimmicks. No, we don't do social media updates. We don't do video. We just go after stories. and find interesting stories and try to make them as interesting as possible. And in fact, it's been working. I want to demonstrate that. Our circulation has been rising. Our ad revenue has been rising. It's also about ad design. We want to design ads well and work with people like that. So if you do your job well, things can go okay. We've been rising in all that time. This incident was a watershed for us. We are the 122nd largest city in the state of Kansas, the 57th largest county. As of today, we have the 8th largest paid circulation in the state because of all the people reaching out to subscribe to us in support of us for this thing. But I have talked about our story at great length, and I suspect maybe one of the things that would be interesting for you to do is ask some questions, and I will be willing, unlike all the other people involved in this who lawyer up. We had to deal with our lawyer. It said, I won't tell you what to say in court, and you don't tell me what to say here. And so we have never shied away from any question that we can answer, and never said this is pending litigation, we aren't going to do that. We've made ourselves available to everybody. I was on Dan Le Batard's show. I mean, what the heck? He talked about a balloon that was in my office. It's actually the remnants of it are sitting over there. I was on Cuomo. By the way, Cuomo's a jerk. Threatened me about that. I've been talked to by the Voice of America. The Washington Post had 4 reporters here at one time. The New York Times had 2 or 3. The Times of London. I've been on everything from a nonprofit podcast and some little podcast that some guy does out of Ohio about social injustice that I think has 12 followers. But I've been willing to be interviewed by anybody and everybody. So this is your chance. You can interview me. Find out what's going on.
Go ahead, guys. You have questions.
Nobody has any questions. That's typical. What do you think? Did we do wrong? Did we do right?
Thoughts? They came up with some questions the other day.
Okay.
You have yours up, Sam? Okay. Well, I'll tell you some of the ones they asked. You've mentioned how your paper fulfilled its role as a watchdog with aggressive reporting. How does that look when it comes to dealing with the important issues of reporting in general? I guess talk about aggressive reporting, what that means.
I actually don't like the term aggressive reporting. I prefer enterprising reporting, but aggressive means that we don't just settle for what somebody says. I mean, there's a line in the movie Absence of Malice where Paul Newman's character challenges Sally Field's character. He says, "You don't report truth. You report what people say." And there's a lot of truth behind that. If we just report the one side of the argument, the other side of the argument, there's facts underneath both those. And we have to avoid looking for the killer quote. One of the things that they teach people when they teach them how to be PR people is always give a reporter a really boffo quote, a good sound bite, something that's very simple and very direct and sounds good, and they'll go away. They won't ask any more questions. One of the classic examples of this was during the Arab oil embargoes of the 1970s, where they told the spokesman for the oil industry, because they were considering nationalizing oil, if you like the nationalized postal service, you'll love nationalized oil. It's an ad hominem argument, but everybody used it. Everybody put it, you get on the Today Show, you get on the Good Morning America, you get on every place else. They've got, 45 seconds to summarize a story, and you give them a bit nifty quote like that, and they'll go away. They'll go away. You're doing the job for them. An aggressive, enterprising reporting says we're not going to be satisfied with that. We're not going to just be satisfied with the first answer. We had this week the sheriff decided he was going to try to embarrass a local car dealership about a warranty for a squad car, and he got up before the county commissioners and ranted and raved about this. Well, we wanted to talk to the car dealer about it. It's really an attempt of people in power to use their power as a bully pulpit for their own purposes. And God, if you don't see that in national politics every single night, you're missing something. Reporting what people say, reporting the facts, it's harder work. And not, people who are, I hate to use Aaron Rodgers because he's hurt, but we'll switch to Patrick Mahomes, I guess. Patrick Mahomes is a great quarterback because he works at it. It's not just the luck. I mean, it's not just that he's physically gifted and whatever. There's work that is involved in this. You become a great reporter by doing work, and that means checking things out, always asking the extra question. And enterprise reporting, the secret to journalism these days is you've got to have stories that surprise readers. That's the factor that drives readership, is whether it's a surprise. It can be a positive surprise, it can be a negative surprise, but it should be uncovering something they didn't know already. Too often, people want to write about things that everybody already knows about, and people don't read those things. They really don't. We've got all sorts of numbers that show that people don't do it. They read things that are surprising. And that's what journalists are supposed to do, is uncover things that are surprising.
That's great. Spontaneous questions, anyone? Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, I have a question. My question is, in the past few decades, the public has been thought to view the journalist's profession with animosity, and at times will try to oppose the occupation with false claims and quote fake news, which results in the violation of one's rights, specifically with the raid on your house and office. Do these scenarios and views from the public deter you from a career in journalism?
Deterred? No. Encouraged? Yes. We don't need thousands of journalists. We need a few. And we need people who are dedicated. We need people who think that this is a field that you enter into because you are a hero of democracy. That's not going to be everybody. But if one of you out of that class goes off in that direction, that's what we're looking for. I don't care if all of you do. I mean, the university would the College of Media would love it because it gets more money because it has more people. I don't care about more people, but at one point during this, and of course, only journalists care about this. When our equipment was being released to us, the deal that had been struck with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation was that the county attorney would announce it and would give us a 30-minute head start so we could break the news online, and then the KBI would announce it out of Topeka. The county attorney reneged on the deal and got announced out of Topeka. At that time, there were about, I would guess, 30 different TV and print people in our newsroom. About 10 different camera crews and a bunch of print reporters were sitting. And I called a spontaneous press conference. And I said, one of the things that we've been accused of is negativity. I said, any of you in this press conference been accused of negativity? All hands went up. I said, we've also been accused of printing fake news. Yeah, you've been accused of that? All hands went up. We're accused of this all the time. We always have been. I mean, people have always hated journalists. They hate journalists. Eventually, you'll hate journalists and you'll love them at the same time. You'll hate journalists when they expose something that you don't want to have exposed. You'll love journalists when they expose something that you want to have exposed. It's a love-hate relationship. It always has been, always will be. I point out that one of our biggest advertisers right now was someone who 20 years ago was one of our biggest enemies because we exposed that they were contributing illegally to a campaign about a sales tax issue. But we treated them well. We exposed other things about things. It comes and goes. It's just one of those things. You're not going to be the most loved person in the world. And I know that for Gen Z and other people is a difficult thing to overcome. You've been raised on the Barney the Dinosaur generation of I love you, you love me, isn't it wonderful? Everyone wins an award, everyone gets along, and it's just hunky-dory. Democracy doesn't exist that way. And the real world doesn't exist that way. There is a competition to be the best. You don't get an award for being in 36th place. You also don't get an award. You don't make an omelet without breaking eggs. You have to come up and expose some things, and yeah, somebody's not like it. Does that bother me? No, I don't care. Not that I don't care about what other people think, but if there's some idiot out there that says that we're not exposing nothing other than fake news, well, the fake news, he's an idiot. Why should I care what he thinks? I care that all of people have an opportunity to hear what all of people think. Around this part, this is a terribly red area. There's still, lots of Trump banners. There's lots of people running in with "Make America Great" caps on. There's also lots of other people. Traditionally, this was an area very near where Dwight Eisenhower comes from. Senator Nancy Kassebaum came from here. They were both remnants of what would be called the moderate wing of the Republican Party, which doesn't exist these days. But it actually was kind of centered in this area. So we're a diverse group of people, but it can't bother you that people say that, because you're contributing to democracy, not to individual people. The best advice that I can ever give anyone who wants to enter journalism, or anything else for that matter, is don't try to fit in. Most of you have spent most of your lives in an educational system that has urged you to fit in. You need to stand out. And so does everyone else who makes a point. It's important. That's if that doesn't happen, if you don't stand out, not just violations like reading our newsroom, but putting people in chokeholds, taking away benefits, penalizing people, ostracizing them, we become, seventh grade cliques if we don't do something better than this. And the upshot of that is, if you start doing that, and then everybody says fake news, fake news, fake news. We just had a stupid thing today that there's a school play this weekend, and we put something in the paper and has the wrong price for it. So immediately somebody goes all over Facebook. The newspaper once again has lied about the blah, 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 blah. The principal says, I sends out an email afterward. I screwed up. I told him the wrong price and I put it on this brochure. It's my fault. Well, nobody's going to see that. They're going to remember that somebody on Facebook said something. By the way, Facebook is all that there is here. They haven't heard of Instagram. They haven't heard of X. They haven't heard of whatever. They're all on Facebook. One of the reporters came in and said, I want to interview you for our TikTok version of this. And I said, oh, good. I can say whatever I want to, because nobody in Marion, Kansas will ever see it. Nobody looks at TikTok. But Facebook's evil. Facebook is damned evil. And I would argue, and I'm sure that your journalism professors are talking about to you, how important it is to have a social media presence. You should have a social media absence. You should avoid the damn things. Use them as a source for information, but don't try to publish on them, because it's an echo chamber, and echo chambers are dangerous. I hate to give the examples of why this town is famous, but one of the other things that the town was famous for was one of the Oklahoma City Federal Building bombers lived in the rural area outside of town. And I did a story back when I was working at the Milwaukee Journal at the time about the dangers. This was before the internet. I mean, this is before there were web pages. But he hung out on bulletin boards that were radical terrorist bulletin boards, and did a bunch of stories on the dangers of people in a cocooned environment. This is the same thing that we say about the Islamic terrorists, or the anti-abortion terrorists, or any group that you're talking about. When you associate with people who all have the same opinion, and no one ever says, it's stupid to do this. No one dares mention the consequences of it. You really get into a danger where eventually it becomes, well, we don't like that guy, let's just kill him. Well, killing's not wrong. If it's something that all the people in our group think is necessary, well, we'll just go ahead and do it. And maybe we can blame somebody. We can find somebody to blame. We can blame the media, or I don't know. We can blame the Jews if we're Germany in the 1930s. We can round them all up and get rid of them. Part of the problem with the media is people don't know what media are. I was talking to Shep Sherman Smith, who's editor of Kansas Reflector, which is an online site. independent reporting site, state's newsroom, and all that kind of stuff. He was at a rally, a Trump rally, in Topeka, and people were hurrying around. Oh, you're the guy who does this and does all this, covers all these great stories and breaks all these things. You're wonderful. You're great. You're all this kind of stuff. Then he went into the meeting, and President Trump said something about the media, and the whole crowd's booing him. It's interesting that the members of the crowd that were going in there thought he was important, but when they talk about the media, well, they're evil. So who do they count as the media? Are they counting all those people on late night TV as the media? Are they talking about all the people who put on comedy shows on cable channels as the media? Are they talking about movies as the media? Or are they talking about real reporters? It's very easy to blame people when somebody says something you don't like. And you'll find out this as you do stories, that you run a 2,000 word story about something, and the 1757th word of that is slightly wrong. But it has nothing to do with the main thrust of the story, but it's slightly wrong. You run it, what'll happen is, see here, they had that thing that was wrong in that story. You can't believe a word they say because you made that one mistake. Well, it's like the quarterback. You forget the 5 touchdown passes because of the one stupid interception, even if you won the game. It's challenging. You have to have a thick skin to do this. You have to be willing to not give up. This is a calling. This is not a place to get rich. It's not a place to get famous. It's a place to do your duty, and your duty to democracy, and have that obligation and have that feeling that you're owed that. Most good journalists believe that way. They're not here just because they love to write and want to get paid for writing. Those people last about 2 years and then go off to grad school for some other major. This is about people who think it's important for society to function, for society to have information.
Eric, can you talk a little bit about, news deserts, because we've talked about that, and, do you have any thoughts on, obviously, your family made a decision that's been beneficial to Marion, Kansas, but there's a lot of places that don't have, a newspaper.
And most of that is attributable to not to changing technology, which is what you've probably heard in your classrooms. And I will tell you it's wrong. And I will tell you this is somebody who used to run an internet news site, who spent a good portion. Actually, I was making more money at the University of Illinois doing consulting for online publishing than I was from the University of Illinois. The reason you got news deserts is because a whole generation of people who led newspapers retired all at once, more or less, and they all sold out to corporations that don't give a flying leap about newspaper business. They looked at the balance sheet and they saw, oh, they own great big buildings in the middle of town, and those buildings are worth a lot of money. We can sell them. And they've got a model that's based on this kind of antiquated system of putting stuff on paper, and it's a pain. We don't want that. We just want to sell their buildings off, and we can cut their staff, and we can still make some money off of them. We're not making huge amounts of money the way we used to. The newspaper industry 30 years ago was pretty common to be making somewhere around 30% profit on sales. 30% profit on sales, all things considered. That's a pretty good profit margin. I mean, drug dealers get that kind of profit margin. But it still makes a much lower margin now. I think our margin was about 7% on sales, and you can make a better one in the stock market. So what's happened is the diminishing of ties to communities. Most news organizations were started by people who were in the town and said, we need to have a good source of information for this town. We're going to start a newspaper, whether it's a Colonel McCormick or an Arthur Ox or the Bingham family, or I could sit here and list families that most of you have never heard of that started newspapers. They started them because they cared about the community they were in. They got bought by companies that are, have the heart and soul of Walmart They have they don't care about anything about the community. That's just another dot in the thing. What's going to need to happen is that all these things that got sold off because they had great real estate, they're going to have to get bought back by people in the community who care about the community, and run by people in the community who care about the community, and then it'll work. Now, will it work in a metro area? Maybe not. About the only thing that unites Chicago is the question of whether the Bears will ever get a quarterback who knows how to be a quarterback. But an actual community, and this is one of the things that's changed, is that the transitory nature of people move around so often that there really isn't a community anymore. The greatest indication of readership of a newspaper is not the age of the person or anything else. It's the length of time they have spent living in the current residence they live in. The longer they've lived in that, whether it's an apartment or a house or the street corner, the longer they've lived there, the more likely they are to want to read the newspaper because they're tied to the community. What does it mean to be from Chicago? Does it mean anything? Are you really from Chicago, or are you from Skokie? Or are you from Evanston? Are you from Arlington Heights? Are you from wherever? You might care about those local communities. You might not if you're somebody who moves from suburb to suburb. I lived in Champaign. I didn't care about Champaign. I cared about my immediate neighborhood, but the rest of it, I was following the Green Bay Packers, and I was following the Kansas Jayhawks. And I cared about the news in Marion, Kansas, and I cared a little more about even Wichita, Kansas, and some other places, and Green Bay or Milwaukee or the town of Pewaukee, which I lived in for many years. Much more than I did what some alderman was doing in Champaign, and that's typical. But local newspapers don't have to be locally circulated either. There are people who care about it right now. I've been engaging for weeks in a discussion with a guy who's a CPA in Wisconsin who came from Marion, all about the need for a forensic audit of Marion, Kansas's books. And he's been finding all sorts of irregularities in those books. He still cares about Marion. People who care about a community will need information about it. And if there are people who care about the community providing that information, the system works. The problem right now is it's been bought by people who aren't from that community, who don't care about the community. We'll get back to it eventually.
Yeah, Sam.
So do you think that same principle of like a community could apply to a non-physical community, such as like more like a group of people, less than just like a town or a physical location?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Virtual communities. And we're going to see more of that. The problem is it's got to avoid being the echo chamber. And that's the challenge right now, is that the community needs to understand that it has diversity within it. A community cannot be monolithic. So I would argue that, you could have a community of people who share an industry, or share personal traits, or share I don't know, sexual preferences or sexual identifications or racial identifications or whatever else, as long as it's got diversity within it, as long as you understand that this is not a community that is homogenous. Otherwise it becomes, once again, that echo chamber. The advantage of a geographic community is that it automatically has more diversity within it. And a community, to be functional, to be meaningful, has to have diversity within it. It has to have people who agree to the social contract, who want to follow the law because it's right, not because they're afraid of getting caught, who don't believe, as is common in government these days, that anything is legal until somebody sues, because everybody doesn't have the ability to pay for a lawsuit. But no, you're absolutely right. A community of people who still have diversity. If it is used to echo chamber and cocoon, then it's a problem. So it depends on how it's executed.
Others? I wanted to ask you, I saw your Wikipedia page. At first, I was wondering if you had a Wikipedia page before this happened.
Actually, a student made that Wikipedia page originally, probably in 2004. And people have updated it since then. I haven't looked at it in a long time. But what does it say?
Well, it talked about when you were a kid that you had your own little newspaper or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I printed a little newspaper. Had a little press that you could put it on. It had rubber type that was basically a rubber stamp, but it was a little round thing. In fact, I pulled it out the other day. There's two different groups right now doing documentaries on me, and one of them was wanting to sell my life rights to a Netflix series and a movie, and I don't know whether that's true, but anyway, I pulled the dang press out of my mother's basement where she still had it and showed them that. But yeah, I think I started that when I was in third or fourth grade, somewhere around then. I've actually worked at this newspaper. I started working here at about fifth grade, and doing different things. But so it's very familiar. I've always wanted to do it. Both my parents worked in the newspaper business. My grandmother worked in the newspaper business. And if you're a woman of that age working in journalism in the 1960s, you were very unusual, particularly if you were not just doing the society pages and the food pages. She was a roving court. She was forced to retire at 65. And the guy who replaced her, Forrest Hintz was his name. His first assignment was to go to Vietnam, and she was pissed. She wanted to go to Vietnam and cover the war, but they wouldn't let her. They made her retire. But that's, things have changed. That was very unusual back then. But we're a victim. Things changed massively. I was in the marching band when I was in college in 1971 at the University of Kansas. Believe this or not, the marching band was all male. We didn't allow women in the marching band. God only knows what logical justification was ever used for this. We had a new director that year, and he immediately changed the rules. But I was in an all-male marching band that was all male by design. The women couldn't possibly be in that band. It's stupid. And we're going to look back at things that are going on now in society 50 years from now, and we're going to say, how stupid was that? Because somebody's opinion will change. The only way that those opinions change is if people have information. That's why we have to have journalists, is to change those opinions and make it say, this was just stupid. Why did we do that? And you've seen this happen with a variety of issues. And a lot of the reasons it's happened is because journalists have been able to tell stories they've been able to tell human stories that get past the hot button issue, that gets past the image and presents an image of a human being that other people can relate to. That's journalism at its finest. And I'm not saying that to do this to advocate anything. What the public does with the information is up to them. They may care about the people, they may not care about the people, but we present it to them and let them make up their mind. And I'm enough of an optimist that I think that if we say it, eventually they'll make the right decision. But I'm also enough of an agnostic about most issues that I don't care what the decision is. I just want to make sure that it was made wisely.
I wanted to ask you something. One of the stories I read, you talked about how you had some students here that were Egyptian, and they had talked about raids on their newsrooms in Egypt, and you said you never thought it would happen here, which made me think, why do you think this happened now? I mean, I have my own thoughts, but why did we get to this point?
I actually had a grad student from Egypt who was around for quite a time. We did a paper on how they had to cover news in Egypt in authoritarian regimes. And it was all about, you never really said what you were going to say. You just made little itty bitty incremental things about it. Instead of saying that there was a terrorist attack on a bank in town, you'd say people heard a loud noise from a bank. And firemen, half an hour later, firemen went toward that. Eventually you get up to putting all the facts in, but you did it so slowly so that no one would do it. Incremental reporting. Why did it happen now? And one of the things that's been raised as a question, there's been a situation down in Alabama where they jailed some people. There was a situation in Illinois where they were giving tickets to a guy for asking questions that have come out since this. I don't think it's happening now. I think it's been happening for some time. I think we just paid attention to it now because honestly, I don't want to brag too much about this, but I don't care. I mean, I make my money being a retiree. I have a stock portfolio. I don't take a salary at this newspaper. They can't hurt me. I do this because I will take, we have a year-end bonus. After we have a year, if we make profit, we'll divide the money up among the people who work there. I will take that, but I don't get paid during the year. I don't do this for money. So they can't hurt us financially. There's nothing they can do. They can't deny me a tee time at the golf course because I don't play golf. Well, I did once. I shot a 72, made it halfway through the third hole. But I don't care about that. I don't care about their parties. I don't care about their whatever else. There's much they can do to me. And what I can do is I can complain to other people about things. And we did. I think I think there are cases where this has happened. We never heard about it because people didn't know it was wrong or they were afraid to raise a fuss about it. Have we been penalized for raising a fuss? Yes, absolutely. There are people who come in here every day who just say to us, we should forget this whole story. It's just making a bad name for the community. It's making a bad name for this. It's making a bad name. There are people who literally believe that it's not important that you're right or wrong. It's important that people think you're right. That you don't have to be a healthy community. You just have to appear to be a healthy community. And that just doesn't sit well with me. But I do think that a lot of this has come about because of cocooning caused by social media and by various populist movements. This paper is in a long tradition of standing against populism in any form. And the populism I'd like to blame Donald Trump, but I also blame Bernie Sanders, and I'll also blame other people because they're following the same sort of general idea of let's get an issue and let's drill it home. Let's make it not be about facts. Let's make it be about images and slogans, and let's play on you. And I don't like the politicians who go to Washington and say, or Springfield or Topeka or wherever they go, and believe in something that they don't believe in. That they do this to get elected. I mean, I'm not going to change my opinion just so somebody will like me. It's my opinion, and I'm not running for office, but if I ran for office, I wouldn't do that either. We know that there's a certain percentage of the society. This is the state of Kansas. We had a vote on abortion rights. The state of Kansas approved abortion rights. That was the Value Them Both amendment last summer. Yet all of our politicians are anti-abortion. Well, wait a minute. The voters approved it. So why do they have to come? Well, because the donors come out and we're appealing to silent interests and what those silent interests do and how they make the agenda. I mean, the fact that we couldn't find a Speaker of the House for I don't know how many days tells you that there's something really wrong with the system because 7 people were holding it up. The fact that it's who screams the loudest is a factor of those evening shows on cable channels and a factor of social media, or as I call it, anti-social media. The fact that we don't have a democratic playground of information and ideas where people can come and find truth and fact and make sure that everyone's opinions are being heard. Are we perfect at that? Of course not. But it's useful to have us. And if you don't, you see this starting to cripple society. And you're going to see once a bully starts one step. Adolf Hitler didn't come up with his first thing that let's round up all the Jews. He tried other things first. It gradually gets to that level. That's what we've got to watch against. And I'm sure that there was somebody in Nazi Germany that, well, you're just being negative. You're not following what their Führer wants. Well, you see what happens if we don't have people who are diligent at this. Germany didn't have a long tradition of democracy at that point. It had only been a democracy since, well, it actually hadn't been a democracy since the end of World War I. And prior to that, it had been a monarchy, and it hadn't even been a United State until 1873. So it didn't have a tradition that we have, that we can keep alive. But we're surrendering that tradition. We're letting people do it, and we're doing it because we're so excited. Oh, I got this really cool soundbite from this candidate who said this really stupid thing, and we're going to put it on air, or we're going to put it on our Twitter feed, or we're going to put it on our X feed. We're going to get the video out. We're going to, oh, we've got to worry about the new media. We've got to promote our app. We've got to do let's promote our truth, not our app. And let's actually study things and know about them. One of the things that's been really interesting about this is I've been interviewed with so many reporters. There's such a gap in levels of quality that the reporters have. Some really good ones. One of the investigative reporters with the Kansas City TV station was at my house yesterday. She's pretty good. Some of the other people have been very good. Washington Post had a very good reporter here. Some of them have been just downright terrible. Most of them are MMJs on small TV stations. One of them went to a city council meeting and thought he was going to hear all about this raid. And instead they started talking about the budget. And he came over afterward to interview me, get his soundbite so he could do a live stand-up in the middle of the street at 10 o'clock that night in front of our office, which was more important to him than having facts, was that he stood up live at 10 o'clock. That's the thing we've got to watch against. And he's sitting there saying, no, they had that stuff about the budget and they were talking about something called mills. What's a mill? Yeah, if you're a veteran reporter, you've got to know that. I mean, this is first order of business of governing a budget hearing. You're not going to understand anything if you don't even know what this is. Now, you guys in the classroom, you're new at this. You probably have no idea what we just talked about, but that's the problem. You're not working as a working journalist for a television station in one of the top 50 markets, which Wichita is. He shouldn't have had that job. He's not qualified for that job. Or he needs to start learning pretty quickly. And that's what's important about things. You've got to know everything. I mean, this is a good business for people who want to be know-it-alls. I used to ask questions. Anybody ever watch there's a weird show on, I don't remember what it's on, Discovery, the Learning Channel, called How It's Made, that in like 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, you're the journalists. That's one thing that people who have been serious about journalism like. If you like knowing things that people don't know, that's the characteristic that you're looking for. And everybody I know has watched that show. That and Bob Ross doing his paintings. I don't quite know why Bob Ross figures into it, but everybody knows Bob Ross too.
Okay, well, any last minute advice for them? We've got about 5 minutes left.
Consider doing this. We need people to do it. I have right now 2 openings I can't fill. I have a bigger news staff than almost all the newspapers, daily newspapers around me. And now we have a bigger circulation than they do too. But here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to go work in New York City or Chicago. You want to come to a small place like this where you can do the big stories of the day. You will never get ahead working the breaking news desk of a major metropolitan thing, or the suburban desk of a major metropolitan thing, or being an MMJ, going out thrown out of things that you're covering short because you're going to be doing crap. You need to do things that are important. Now, they may only be important to a small market, but being a big duck in a little puddle, you learn a lot very quickly about how to be a duck. Being a little duck in a great big puddle, you just learn about fetching coffee and swimming around, and you're going to be unhappy. So consider working in a small market. where you can do the important things, where you can do the most important things of that day. And also get a frigging internship. Even if you aren't planning to do this, get the internship anyway. Because the important thing that you need to understand as a student in this is that people will read or watch or listen to what you do. You need to make that connection between you and a real audience, not, don't just please your faculty member. I mean, she's a nice person and all that, but if you're writing to make her happy, you're not experiencing what it is to be a journalist. You have to see that you've written something, it's made a change in the world, and now you know what journalism is all about. It's not about the tricks of the trade you learn in an internship. But even if you do all those things, you go to a small place, get an internship, and you say, well, this really isn't for me. I care more about money. I care more about, working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I want to be a party planner. Everybody wants to do that these days. And you decide that, this isn't for you. It's important to note that the skills you learn in terms of finding unexpected things, relating them to people in a way that you can put a human face on it so they can understand it, are skills that will be valuable in any profession. My son is a department manager at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory about the resiliency of the nation's cyber and infrastructure. So he's can't tell me what he works on most of the time. He's working on secret stuff. He's an engineer. He contends the way that he got ahead in the business was that he had been, the editor of his high school newspaper and had journalists he grew up around. So he was the engineer who could write, who knew how to express things and knew how to reach an audience. Reaching an audience is very important, and being able to express things clearly is very important. So it's a skill that's worth having. And if you like it and then realize that it's also a skill that democracy needs, and you really want to do something to make this world a better place, then it's a business too. So
Great. Thank you so much, Eric.
thank you, guys.
We really appreciate it. And we'll
Y'all,
keep following your story.
thank you.
Okay.
It will never end. So
All
care.
right. Take care, Eric. Bye-bye.